Okay, so I'm going to talk about music and the urge to creative life. It is all too easy to think of music as having an entertaining function, which appeals to human emotion. But it might be claimed that music has indeed a deeper and more significant aspect. Age after age, lofty ideas have found expression in different branches of knowledge and human endeavor. We are all aware of the advance of scientific knowledge during recent decades, and one can hope that the evolution of human thought, ruled by the cyclic manifestation of certain rays, will eventually bring about another golden age of the arts, perhaps of a higher quality than any humankind has ever experienced. Both science and the arts, and any branch of human endeavor, can be a vehicle of divine ideas poured by those great beings whose only purpose is the uplifting of mankind and the materialization of that kingdom of God, foreseen by St. Paul, which has always existed since the dawn of civilization, but which has yet to be precipitated on earth. This will bring about that golden age of universal brotherhood, of which so many myths, not yet understood in their deepest meaning, are silent witnesses. Many of us who are fond of music have wondered if music can only be valued in terms of how emotionally moving it can be. We feel that there is something beyond that, that the power of certain music to awaken joy lies more in the realm of ideas, in a certain bridge which can be woven into subtler realms. Why did a towering scientist like Albert Einstein find inspiration in the music of Mozart? The New York Times, in an article of August the 10th, 1999, named this factor the Mozart effect, claiming that, quote, subjects perform better on abstract or spatial levels after listening to Mozart, end quote. The Nature International Weekly Journal of Science of October the 23rd, 1993, seriously considered the possibility that Mozart really makes one smarter. Clearly, there is some kind of music which conveys deep levels of significance, besides awakening subtle feelings. That music, abstract ideas, ensoul an amazing architecture. This way, a symphony can be turned into something not too different from a great cathedral. For H.P. Blavatsky, the harmony of the spheres was much more than a mere philosophical fancy. She looked upon sound as the effect produced by the vibration of the ether, the impulses communicated to the ether by the different planets may be likened to the tones produced by the different notes of a musical instrument. She thus, of course, gave a key to the ancient science of astrology. For, let me quote, certain planetary aspects may imply disturbances in the ether of our planet, while certain others rest on harmony. Certain kinds of music throw us into frenzy. Some exalt the soul to religious aspirations in the same way as certain colors excite us, while some others soothe and please. There's a mysterious alliance between color and sound, she postulated. H.P. Blavatsky had been a gifted pianist herself. She had received lessons from Moscheles, a noted pianist composer of the time, which suggests that she might have once considered earning a living as a professional pianist. However, she was not really sure that contemporary art was developing along the right lines as her bitter article, Civilization, the Death of Art and Beauty, suggests. What a name, by the way. She would certainly have agreed with Ludwig van Beethoven that music is a revelation higher than any other wisdom or philosophy. Music would eventually be expected to reveal that the intelligent design which underpins the universe is organized according to certain mathematical principles, which are in deep correspondence with the human being. And this is because man is a microcosm. The correspondences between the cosmos, the heavenly man, and the microcosm, the earthly man, had already been explained by the Hermetic philosophy of Hellenistic times and the Kabbalah, of course. Now, these are beautiful concepts, but they will remain a mystic fancy unless we find the way to use them in order to help create a new civilization on Earth. We know the spiritual path is a path of recognitions which lead to change. Let us explore the part music plays in it. Words are sounds, therefore they have power. You might have noticed that some insightful writers have a capacity to awaken us to a new world of thought and meaning through a careful choice of words. In a demonstration of the principle energy follows thought, certain words are found to have a deeper meaning than expected. Certain ancient languages like Sanskrit have a tremendous power and are able to embody realms of meanings not even suspected in any modern language. The effort to convey deep realms of significance through the use of a modern language can particularly be seen in the Tibetans' musical use of words. That which our brains decode as music, the physical vehicle of which being a complex longitudinal wave that propagates through the air, is a wonderful intuitive construction based on a sevenfold structure of chords, pretty much like the universe itself. In the West, its foundations were laid by the Pythagorean school. If Pythagoras ever visited India, as his biographers state, we might well imagine where he drew his sources from. The musical system is, loosely put, a sevenfold group of forces which are cyclically brought into activity in a piece of music, similar to the way in which the ray forces come into activity throughout human history, or in the life cycle of an individual. Each of these 7 forces or degrees, so-called in music, are basically triads or chords. When we are told that the soul is the dominant note, the Tibetan master is referring to the 5th of these chords that can be formed on the musical scale. And the musical scale, this dominant note has a synthesizing quality. It is, so to say, right in the middle, mediating within the system as the soul mediates between the monad and the lower self. And if you have not understood, it doesn't matter really. Has it ever happened to you that certain words, even when not understood in their meaning, cause a stirring inside, as if some intuitive idea were percolating into the brain? This is possibly the proof of the power of sound and the attending meaning it evokes. The biblical parables had that function as well as myth itself. Many clues in the ancient wisdom are there waiting to be decoded by most of us, so that once understood, they can find their way into our daily living. If we find certain teachings too abstract, it is because we have not yet found the way to apply them to our daily living. A particularly powerful word is, I believe, imagination. Why was a composer like Mozart able, first of all, to sense those higher realities and translate them, step them down into written music? In my musical journey, I found that piercing reflective thought, not only subtle feelings, was a hallmark of all great composers. They were deeply in tune with what they were trying to accomplish. They were not thinking in scholarly terms, as the student of musical composition is today encouraged to do, by the way, or in obeying certain dogmatic rules of composition. They were in fact creating new rules, opening up new ways. They are able to focus their consciousness on a high level and keep it stable to a certain extent. In a way, Mozart cultivated an interest in the world of meaning and developed ways to impress those meanings on his physical brain so that they could run true to the hidden impulse. So they were creating new rules. And I think that that constant and sometimes painful effort to try to understand, decode higher perception is a real exercise in creative imagination. So divine imagination, we're told, turns out to be the key to the capacity for sensing and bringing down those realities. It is the heart of what we call creative life. So what the composer receives is indeed an inflow of light, which takes the form of music. This light is decoded, stepped down, or translated into music as it passes through the inner ear and brain of an inspired composer with a sensitive mechanism of reception, because light and sound are but two phases of the gamut of vibrations to different ranges. To a certain extent, we have all experienced eureka moments, eureka in Greek meaning I found. Cosmic harmonies which translate as light are the result of, or rather are, the symphonic hymn caused by the incessant movement of the life atoms of those divine beings which fill the universe, said G. de Purucker, a mystical description of what Aristotle called the harmony of the spheres in his, in my opinion, rather unsuccessful attempt to explain Pythagoras. Indeed, we have all felt at some point that there is some kind of beauty which does not belong to this earth and cannot therefore be put into words. We hear a beautiful music and an extraordinary change takes place within us, as if something inside resonated with that music. And we find it to be a true feeling, even when we cannot explain it. The concept of the music of the spheres is based on the fact that sound permeates all forms. The planet has its own note or sound, as each dust particle, and each human being has its own peculiar chord, as each group has, all chords contributing to the great symphony. Should we be able to hear, our own bodies would be perceived as a symphonic orchestra, singing some magnificent, incomprehensible composition. The growth of a flower would be like a change in melody from day to day. Many of us have experienced that somehow we have our own notes. We know that certain sounds evoke a deep resonance within our chambers, if you like, while others have an insignificant or even shattering effect. In our meditations, certain ohms resonate as being uttered by hundreds of people, while some other times they do not seem to stir a single atom of the surrounding atmosphere. Here and now, and each time we meditate, we are sounding a group note. Alignment, as the attempt to tune into the note of the soul, has a certain correspondence to the tuning of an instrument before a concert, so that concerted group harmony can be created. In an aligned or tuned mechanism, inspiration can flow in and soul energy can flood the personality and sweep through all the centers, we are told. In fact, in the ancient Pythagorean school, the core of the matter of music and harmony lay in the principle of resonance, demonstrated by two strings vibrating in sympathy. If, as the Pythagoreans held, man is a microcosm and the soul is harmony, it is through a form of resonance or sympathy that alignment can take place. This is because there are processes in our minds which are analogous to those in nature. If we cannot hear that universal music, it is because of the limitations of our mechanism of response, of reception. And please note that these words, which may sound to us as coming from the Tibetan master, were in fact written by Porphyry in his Life of Pythagoras almost 2,000 years ago. So, one may wonder, is any inspired artist aligned and soul infused? It is fair so to wonder. Let me take the example of a great composer, Richard Wagner. In the letters from the Mahatmas to Synod, he is called a true artist by the masters themselves. He was unquestionably a major source of inspiration for the composers of the 20th century. However, it is rather difficult to reconcile Wagner's self-conceited, uncompassionate, megalomaniac personality with that towering artist who revolutionized the world of art. He even wrote an infamous article called Judaism in Music, in which he blames Jewish people for being the evil consciousness of modern civilization, an article which would eventually find its way into Hitler's hands. At the same time, he could create the loftiest harmonies in musical techniques. We might agree that these are features seldom found combined in one single personality. His leading motif technique is so far-reaching in its scope that one may wonder what kind of thought currents were in activity at the time when both Blavatsky and Wagner were at work. When in the Valkyrie, the music depicts the meeting of two lovers, the sense of sweet intimacy is profoundly moving. However, a careful listener may notice that in the background, a gloomy and ominous melody is heard in a somber counterpoint. It is bringing the echo of an ancient curse. It is announcing that this love is doomed to tragically end. At the same time, different allusions are heard to their divine father, to their past, to their lineage. Even their unspoken thoughts are disclosed by the music. The music thus functions as the mental plane which gives another side to the story. Or when the use of dissonance and certain musical modes in Parsifal embody the struggle between the forces of light personified by the community of the Grail and the forces of darkness by the Black Magician. Wagner's sun and rising sign in Gemini conjunct Venus, the esoteric ruler, can perhaps account for the emphasis on the polar opposites both in his music and his private life. On one hand, a dissonant personality, on the other, unending musical inspiration and the capacity to change the history of music forever. As a matter of fact, Mrs. Besant's and Mr. Leadbeater's clairvoyant sightings have described the radiation of Wagner's music as monumental structures of unspeakable proportions and colors. Wagner could achieve a true soul function, creative art for which a certain degree of alignment is required. He focused upon the world of meaning and successfully expressed ideas in proper musical language. And this is not too different from the effort of a writer of a poet or a poet who trains his mechanism through which inspiration must flow so that a beautiful externalization of the inner realities can be accomplished. We may now have an idea of why in esoteric psychology it is said that it is along the line of discipline that many artists fail. We have developed a deep-rooted concept of creative art as intuitive and emotional. That intuition plays an important part in artistic creation, we all agree. But perhaps the flaw lies in the idea that too great an attention on mental training can hinder the work of creation. A talent such as Wagner's could only have unfolded over a period of lives through an intense, focused interest along one line of endeavor. Thus, the ability to excel in one field awakes that supreme conceit which results from showing a greater capacity than the average human being. Psychological studies show that the types of personalities who can feel themselves isolated from the rest include those exceptionally gifted persons who know themselves to have a superior quality or talent and willingly keep themselves separated from the rest. They are but showing possibilities which any human being can develop through applied effort. When the painter Pablo Picasso admonished, "Let inspiration find you at work," he tried to stress the importance of discipline and training, which real inspiration or soul infusion can use. Pianist Byron Janis caught a glimpse of this problem when he said that only by giving can music evoke the mysteries from other worlds. Call it inspiration, call it catching the elusive now, but that is music. Music transcends both piano and pianist, end quote. Sooner or later, those flights of inspiration must give way to a more permanent expression of the soul in some creative activity, thus revealing the world of meaning. Throughout history, many pioneering thinkers contributed to the growth of human civilization, but the creativeness they demonstrated has often been of a somewhat disruptive quality. And it was because old patterns had to be destroyed. While some great composers have built upon an already existing tradition, some others, like Beethoven, came to destroy the old forms and thus usher in new ways. The egocentric view cannot hold any longer, said Roberto Sierra in an article of one of the main newspapers in Buenos Aires. He was attempting to prove that music as a discipline is not too different from modern business and enterprise. To be positioned at the center, to put customers and consumers around, trying to exhaust their resources and thus make as much money as possible is no longer sustainable. It is part of an old-fashioned ego system where every component is turned into an adversary. and must therefore be destroyed. It is a predator model, an exhausted paradigm. To be able to usher in a true ecosystem, he continues, one should be able to destroy old patterns, as those great composers did in their own time. When Joseph Haydn breaks the symmetry and regularity, plays with the surprise factor, with silence, with delay and a final sense of fullness, he is being disruptive in the same way as a plant must disrupt the soil in order to be able to grow and unfold. So there is a disruptive quality in creativeness. And the great artists, in some way, if you allow me the biblical intertext, came with a sword. The new paradigms are seldom accepted immediately. Beethoven, even at his worst moments of deafness and rejection, his music was considered too disruptive in his time, kept focused on his work. The absence of hearing capacity did not hinder his work because his mind was focused on the world of meaning. He wants to break up everything I teach him, said Haydn of his student. When Haydn listened to Beethoven's Third Symphony, he admitted that music had been changed forever. When Beethoven composed his Fifth Symphony, he did it with an amazing fractal approach. One can find that right at its inception, a single motif is heard, which develops and exuberantly unfolds throughout the first movement, as a seed gives birth to a tree with all its branches and leaves and flowers. One may hear both symmetry and the disruption of it, all overflowing with meaning. The balance of their internal elements turn the great pieces of music into a demonstration of that occult truism, unity in diversity, and thus the architecture that emerges within the mind is not too different from that of the most beautiful cathedral. The 20th century, more than any other century, embodied this disruption of old forms, and quite a few of the composers of the 20th century cared to build their music upon esoteric principles and the relationship between color and sound. One of them was a Russian composer, Alexander Scriabin. In his conception of music, sound permeates all forms, and every atom of the planet has its own inherent sound and color. Scriabin had a major impact on the music world over time and influenced composers such as Igor Stravinsky and Sergei Prokofiev. His closest counterparts, Bowers wrote, are found in poetry with William Blake or in painting with Nicholas Roerich. Scriabin's belief in a mystical task of art inspired by Wagner himself was in fact reinforced by his acquaintance with esoteric teachings. In Prometheus, the poem of fire, he relates keys with colors, and for what for most musicians are technicalities are for him displays of energy and an experiment with sound and color. Astrologer and composer Dane Rudier wrote that Scriabin was, quote, the one great pioneer of the new music of a reborn Western civilization, the father of the future musician. In his article, Serra insists on the fact that this holistic model that those great composers anticipated must be applied to modern living, as it advocates the interconnectedness of all its parts. In other words, what we do reaches everyone. Science itself is showing that everything is a network. Meteorologist and mathematician Edward Lorenz poetically referred to this as the butterfly effect. The flapping of the wings of a butterfly in Brazil can determine the details of a tornado in Texas. In fact, what all of us have experienced during this pandemic may have already taught us that we are all interconnected in the same way as the musical system, where no element can be defined or has significance except by its relationship with the rest of the elements. Thus, the rules of group work are not different from the rules of music. It can be claimed that those rules answer to what in the future will be known as the true sciences of esoteric astrology and psychology, which will one day take their right place as the informing soul of their personality vehicles, namely astronomy and physiology, as Ralston Skinner so insightfully suggests in The Source of Measures. Thus, it would be a mistake to think that only those who are capable of isolated flights of genius can perform real creative work. Those who were and are a rare efflorescence of human creativity. We are told that the time is not yet ripe for the fourth lord of creative expression to resume activity upon the earth. There is, it seems, a deeper meaning to the words creative imagination, which does not point exclusively to the wonderful labor of artists around the world. The creation of a new world order is essentially a group work. The starting point seems to be our willingness to submit to training in visualization as a first step toward the direction of energy. The power to visualize is the form-building aspect of the creative imagination. The true creative process seems to involve the precipitation of those intuitive ideas from the Buddhic levels and their clothing in substance so that they can finally take on physical form. It is essentially a scientific process, which implies conscious work on matter. This may sound like magic Harry Potter style, but it is not. Creativity is, after all, a state of mind, which entails a capacity to be magnetic and therefore change the surrounding vibration. It is the result of a state of being. We can barely glimpse the future possibilities of music, but myth can, I think, throw us a hint. Orpheus was the legendary musician, poet, and prophet, which was quite the same thing in ancient Greece. He is the archetype of the inspired musician who is able to charm both living and inanimate things with his music. In a way, he also stands for the mysteries of initiation and was credited so many gifts to mankind, even those ascribed to other gods: medicine, writing, divination, magic, and astrology. All these qualities were not really separated from his music. In the voyage of the Argonauts, he succeeded in drowning the spell of the siren's chant, the call of glamour. He introduced order and civilization, and his attempt to retrieve his beloved Eurydice from the underworld with the charm of his music almost succeeded, except for that inevitable tendency of the lower nature to turn to the past, that which lies behind on the way. Orpheus would eventually be torn to pieces by Maenads, an analogy of spirit, the male side, being divided and made multiple by Mother Nature, the female aspect. His many gifts can give us a glimpse into all the magical qualities attached to music by those anonymous creators of traditional stories. In them, music is shown to have tremendous powers, including those associated with the mysteries of initiation. So, we should not be surprised to read that a future dispensation will reveal its amazing powers, including assisting the healer to bring about a cure, or even more amazingly, to facilitate the process of death. The connection of Orpheus with the underworld may testify to this. Sound helps thus in the liberation from attachment to form and may provide the right environment for the great release to take place as a natural occurrence. Iamblichus, in his Life of Pythagoras, tells us that within the Pythagorean school, music was used instead of medicines. Certain melodies were used as antidotes for anger and rage, and they are even said to have had certain sounds to purify desires. Around the vernal equinox, a certain melody was used for healing purposes. A person playing the lyre was surrounded by a circle of experienced singers who could sound specific notes. As we see already in this ancient tradition, which, by the way, sounds quite like the future use of music as forecast by the Tibetan master, this will involve a group of trained workers, and definitely not an isolated musical genius, however great his or her possibilities of tapping the higher Buddhic planes. In myth, a single character like Orpheus does not stand for only one individual, but remains a promise for all mankind. All these wonderful ancient stories invite us to rethink the meaning and function of sound. In a world where silence seems to be the exception, it may be difficult to glimpse the creative function of sound and word, the power of which ancient Greek and Sanskrit language and poetry took for granted. We are surrounded by millions of words pointlessly spoken daily. And if telepathy is said to be the future means of communication, then the real function of speech must be to create, to heal, and bring about a new set of vibrations, a new world order through group service. Silence thus turns out to be a key to the problem of reception. And another thing that this pandemic has taught us is that we are kind of out of tune with nature. Among other things, because we are too noisy. Sensitivity is not anything one can be trained in, we are told. All women and men are sensitive by nature. We human beings must simply learn not to be noisy, eventually discovering that 1,000 voices of a universal symphony surround us. The art of attentiveness is thus not too different from the art of self-forgetfulness. This is at least an aspect of that deeper and more significant quality of music that we can undertake to disclose. So what has been called the music of the spheres takes on fresh proportion and meaning. And as far as myth is concerned, let us remember that in more than one cosmology, the world was brought into being by a word being uttered. We may only wonder what a wonderful capacity a group of trained workers could develop in order to bring that world of meaning to our world of daily living. Imagine a group capable of issuing those sounds which create those vibrations and forms which express sensed truth, through a stable focusing of consciousness on the world of meaning. The resulting beauty which could be produced in the world through this collective use of the creative imagination could be something of which those great masterpieces of music and art are but shadows of things to come, flights of genius by individually gifted artists who anticipated the future possibilities in store for humankind. In the end, art seems to remain a constant reminder of our commitment to create vibrations of beauty here and now on this plane of daily living. Plato was not wrong after all. We must learn to focus, as he said, our minds on those archetypal ideas or forms which will help build a new civilization. In his 7th letter, he made clear that certain subjects admit of no verbal expression. They can only be brought about in the soul through group communion, which he called syzen in ancient Greek. This is done, quote, as light is kindled by a leaping spark, end quote, he wrote. Beautiful words, written more than 2,000 years ago, at a time when meditation had already been practiced for thousands of years in the valley of the Hindu River. Indeed, God has never left himself without witness. Through the words of all those who reached the other shore, the idea of a purpose, a plan, can be glimpsed. So when it comes to how we can cooperate with those great beings who know the plan, we understand that we must be integrated into a body, a musical instrument which can resonate with that purpose. In a crowd of people, each one with their own separate thoughts and feelings, this becomes rather difficult. This is dissonance. Integration means the creation of a perfect harmony, and this entails the sounding of distinctive notes, not random ones. So, which is each one's real note, one may wonder. Well, not easy to answer that, but I think it has to do with sounding the note of our real individuality that contributes to the group harmony, the note which represents our singular beauty. And at this point, I think beauty has to do with truth. For when we make a personal effort to be singular, that is the actor trying to behave singularly and impress others. When all that is gone, only the essential nature remains, which is that light, that individual ray, the firm rock of our being, our distinctive note within the universal harmony. Easier said than done, yes. But the power to bring those songs from the universal spheres in that kingdom of souls into being on earth does not seem to lie in isolated gifted individuals, but in planetary group work. The time will come, we are told, when sound can be scientifically used to that purpose. We can thus imagine what high type of world service a group of workers trained in meditation can render. The triangles activity is one amazing example of this possibility. Thank you. Well, but let me now include some music playing. Played on the only piano I have access to due to the present quarantine regulations. This will be a very homemade recording, okay? We will start with Bach. He liked to combine several melodies simultaneously, thus creating a sense of never-ending movement. I believe his music includes beautiful descriptions of those universal cycles and the ceaseless vibration of manifestation. We will listen to the beginning of his English suite and the ending of his second partita. We will next move on to Mozart. A lengthier piece would be a better demonstration of Mozart's amazing mind. But let us at least listen to a delicious piece which is a part of a larger sonata, Rondò alla Turca. In this musical form, where one can hear a certain theme or melody ever recurring. Then a short piece from the romantic 19th century, when the music focused on human emotion and began its attempt to break free from old rules, Liszt's Liebestraum, or Dream of Love. And finally, some little unpretentious improvisation on the tone of E-flat major, the keynote of Taurus, for us to close our eyes and connect with that energy of Taurus. To some extent, this must largely be of a symbolic nature, as we are told the time has not come for us to have the real keys to the wielding of sound. Thank you.